Yo, what is happening, guys? How are you doing? This is Rob of Rule2R Review. Welcome back to the channel, and today I wanted to do a list video because I've had a couple of list ideas in my head floating around for a couple of months, and I realized I hadn't made one since right at the beginning of the year, talking about the 10 games that I was the most anticipated for coming into 2019. And yeah, I like making list videos. I think most people enjoy watching them. I think a lot of YouTubers enjoy making them as well because it's just fun to put things into an order based on things that you enjoy. And what I wanted to do was discuss the top 6 games of this generation that I've played so far. And I know that 6 might sound like a weird number. You might think that you would do the top 10 games or even the top 5 and kind of cut that list in half. And I was going to do a top 5, but there's honestly so many games I wanted to talk about. And if I make a top 10 video, it's going to just be so crazy long. And so I figured I would do the top 5 plus 1 and just go to 6 because why not? And so, of course, we're doing this just for fun. And that also means that we're discussing my own personal opinion here. I'm not trying to lay out what I think are the 6 best games necessarily, because I'm not trying to make an official list and tell you that you should agree with my games and the order that I place them. That would be crazy. This is just my experience as one gamer. You know, I have all the consoles and I now have a gaming PC. And I obviously, due to that, I don't play every single game, and I don't play every single franchise. There are definitely a few that maybe some of you may expect to show up on this list, and it's very possible that I didn't even play them because they might not interest me. So I'm not trying to necessarily cover every game and franchise this generation. It's, you know, as one gamer experiences the games that they enjoy playing and the ones that they want to play, that's the list that I'm making it out of. Now, obviously, if we're talking about current generation games, we're talking about the Xbox One, we're talking about the PlayStation 4, we're talking about the Nintendo Switch, and of course games also available on the PC. I considered doing the top 10 version and also wrapping in the Wii U because I kind of wanted to do that. I feel like the Wii U and the Switch have sort of split the generation, and there are a lot of games I love on the Wii U. But again, just for the sake of keeping this simple, I figured Xbox, PS4, Switch, and that's just what it is. And again, to make it only 6 games. And I also wanted to make sure to include only one game from a franchise. There is one franchise that might have had 2 entries on this if I wanted to actually do individual games, but I wanted to stick to just individual franchise entries. So with that being said, let's go ahead and start off with number 6. And for myself, coming in at number 6 is Dark Souls 3. Now, I played Dark Souls 3 on the PlayStation 4, and man, this game is great. A lot of you may know I'm a huge fan of the Souls series and everything that From Software has been doing the last couple of years. I think that Dark Souls 3 was an excellent entry. In fact, it's probably my favorite actual Dark Souls game. And that is a controversial statement because a lot of Dark Souls purists who go way, way back to even the Demon Souls days, for example, I think that it seems like most people feel like the games started off better and they got less good as they went on. I'm even somebody who likes Dark Souls 2. I thought that was a very good game as well, and a lot of Dark Souls fans don't like it. But for me, I think that the games actually got better, man. I mean, I enjoy them all, don't get me wrong. They're all fantastic, but I think Dark Souls 3 was just this perfect evolution of the series. The combat got a little bit faster, a little bit smoother, the dodge mechanic felt better, and the world was amazing. It was way more intertwined and interweaving and had all these different ways to kind of move yourself between the sections compared to previous games. I mean, they do all have that, but I think that Dark Souls 3 just went to the next level. The bosses were the best they'd ever been. The worlds and the areas were the most fun to explore for me. I just loved everything about Dark Souls 3. So for me, that is the 6th best game I've played this generation so far. Now, coming in at number 5 is a game that was really tough for me to place on this, and I had to really think about it before I knew I wanted to include it on this list. And that is going to be Fallout 4. And I think it's another one similar to Dark Souls 3 that might be controversial for a couple of people because I think a lot of folks feel like previous Fallout games were much better than Fallout 4. And what's interesting is I think the first year or 2 that this game was out, I probably agreed. I felt like, man, I enjoyed playing Fallout 3 so much more than playing Fallout 4. But the reason Fallout 4 moved up and actually made it on this list for myself is because after like a year-long break, I came back to it last year just randomly. I just got a wild bug up my butt, and I was like, you know, I'm gonna put a Fallout 4 in and I just kind of miss wandering around the wasteland and see what it's like. And something about that revisiting of the game last year changed everything for me. And I got re-addicted. I fell in love all over again. And I think that I let go of the trappings of being so dedicated to Fallout 3 and New Vegas, which I think is also very good. And I kind of just let Fallout 4 be the game that it was and appreciated the fine-tuning that they did for Fallout 4 compared to previous games, even though, yes, all of these games are very buggy. And I just was like, man, actually Fallout 4 kicks ass. And it just worked for me. It clicked for me on a whole new level once I took a year break and then came back to it, and I realized this is definitely one of my favorite games of the generation. I'm a huge fan of a post-apocalyptic setting. I love Bethesda's games, the Elder Scrolls, and the Fallout games. I think that they're all just fantastic. I don't even mind the buggy engines. I mean, they are buggy, and that is a problem that they hopefully can fix over the next few releases, but it's never really hindered me from enjoying the games personally, and so Fallout 4, it's just everything I want. Wandering around this crazy nuclear destroyed frickin' Boston area. I just think it is fantastic. I love the world. I love the map. And so for me, it's number 5. Now coming in at number 4 is the most recent game on this list. And I probably should wait longer to make sure I feel this way about it, but I don't care. I definitely know that I love this game that much. And it is the Resident Evil 2 remake. And it should be noted that were this list longer, or if I had changed some of my rules, I probably would also have Resident Evil 7 on this list as well, because I think 7 was a fantastic return to form for the series. Even though it was in first person, I loved Resident Evil 7 as well. But the old school Resident Evil just appeals to me a little bit more, and even though they way modernized Resident Evil 2, I still think they made an absolutely marvelous, spectacular game. Everyone's been talking about it. It got rave reviews, and it's just a game that appeals to me. I love Resident Evil, you guys. It's one of my favorite gaming series in all of existence, and even though I'm one of the few weirdos that prefers the old school static camera tank control Resident Evil, I also do love the over-the-shoulder style that was introduced with Resident Evil 4, and I appreciate that they went to great lengths to recreate and rebuild everything Resident Evil 2 using that style. I mean, it showed a lot of love and care, and having 2 main campaigns to go through and then 2 secondary campaigns to go through where you could play Leon and then Claire, or Claire then Leon, and the way they changed those up, it's just awesome. And I love the atmosphere. They made it very, very scary. I still think the original Resident Evil 2 is a little bit scarier, even though they can create kind of more of a scary ambience with the current generation and the better visuals compared to 1998, obviously. But I feel like in 98, it just felt more unique to play a game and be scared. So maybe I'm just being nostalgic there. Either way, Resident Evil 2 is a freaking masterpiece, a great entry in one of my favorite franchises of all time. Again, the game is only like 6 weeks old, but it is that good. So for me, it is the 4th best game I've played this generation. Now coming in at number 3 is a game that almost made it to spots 2 or even number 1, but I ultimately settled on it here at 3, and that is God of War on the PlayStation 4, which is now almost a year old, as crazy as that seems. And what can be said about God of War that hasn't already been said? I adore this game. This is one of the most spectacle-filled achievements in video game creation ever. It is the perfect amalgamation of the craft of creating a video game, because obviously it's beautiful and has groundbreaking visuals. It has an amazing world to explore, a wonderful story, incredible characters and arcs, an amazing journey and adventure that they go on, and great gameplay. Something that I admit, a little bit nervous about when they first showed us this game and I saw how different it was to the previous God of Wars. And I love those old God of Wars, you guys. I really liked the old Chains of Olympus, just, you know, with the camera that you can't really control, panned way back, and you're just slashing and comboing hordes of enemies. It was simple, dumb fun, but to me, it worked. And I wouldn't have been sad if the PS4 God of War was more like that. But they went in this different direction, and I was like, man, it looks cool and interesting and story-driven, and I'm into it, but I'm also nervous because I don't want it to be restrictive. Like, I like being Kratos and just running around just destroying fools, and I was worried the game wouldn't have much combat or control to it. But I was wrong. They nailed that aspect as well. The most important aspect, actually. They nailed that. Everything else, the story and the visuals and the world and all that, that's just like extra superfluous stuff on top. You gotta nail the combat and the gameplay, and they did that first, and then everything else came together. It is a game I will never forget. It is such an achievement, Sony, and everything that they did with that. I don't know what to say, you guys. I love old school God of War 2, like I said, and I wouldn't be sad if we had a return to that gameplay in the future. But this was something special. This is a landmark moment in gaming for me, personally, and so it's the third best game of this generation. Coming in at number 2 is a bit of a fanboy pick, but I'm going to stick by it, and that is Bloodborne, also on the PlayStation 4. And I know I'm kind of cheating in a way, depending on how you want to look at it, because I said only one game from a franchise, and I did include Dark Souls 3, and now we have Bloodborne. And so I could see how, for some people, you're like, hey, that's breaking the rules. But you know what? I feel like they're different enough. There's no confirmation that they're in the same universe, and they're not technically the same series, even though they obviously share a lot of similarities. So for me, I'm considering Bloodborne separate from Dark Souls, and it makes it to number 2. And it's for a lot of the same reasons as Dark Souls 3. I mean, I love this combat. I love this very dark, evil, twisted world, and this kind of gothic motif that From Software has put into the Souls game, and also, of course, Bloodborne. Bloodborne focusing a little bit more on like a neo-Victorian sort of setting for at least a lot of the early areas. And I just think it's magical. I actually think if you chart everything from Demon Souls through the Dark Souls games leading up to Bloodborne, I think that you can see that what Bloodborne did and introduced to this mechanic, to this type of gameplay that really From Software in a way kind of pioneered, is something special, because I really think they had this amazing combination of taking it in a newer, different, exciting direction, but while also making it feel similar and familiar in a way that wasn't like, you know, copying the things that they had done before or showing that they didn't have new ideas. They just knew how to fine-tune what they had been building leading up to it, and I think that Bloodborne was the perfect amalgamation of everything they've ever done. Even, obviously, Dark Souls 3, which came after it, because, again, I'm ranking Bloodborne much higher. I do, however, think that what they learned with making Bloodborne did translate back into Dark Souls 3, and I think it's the reason that Dark Souls 3 turned out so well, and in my opinion, better than the previous games, because Bloodborne was that pinnacle achievement for From Software. And I love the setting, I love the combat, I love how I love the different weapons that they allow you to start with. It's a very different approach than what they did with the Dark Souls games. And that cleaver, that main weapon, that's the famous weapon, I mean, it's just amazing. It is so fun to use, and being able to, every weapon has 2 different ways that you can hold and attack with it, and it adds so much depth to the combat. The world and the story was amazing. It's my favorite final boss of all of the Dark Souls games too, and the, you know, Bloodborne, Souls, universe kind of stuff. It's just awesome. This game deserves all the praise that it got. I love that it sold well. I love that it reviewed well. People are humongous fans of this game, and I know we're getting a sequel. It's probably going to be a PS5 game at this point, but I don't care. I love Bloodborne. I want Bloodborne 2, and so for me, the second best game of the entire generation, for me, is Bloodborne. And now I know what you're saying. You're saying, Rob, you're a huge Nintendo fan. Where are the Nintendo games? And yes, that's a good point, but what can I say? As much as I love Nintendo and the Switch, I stand by all of these non-Nintendo games I've discussed. That's how good this generation has been. But now that we're at number 1, it's time to talk about Nintendo, and it probably won't surprise any of you. It's fairly obvious, and it is The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. And it's another game, similar to with God of War, like I said. I mean, what do you say about Breath of the Wild that hasn't already been said, that I haven't said, and that everyone else hasn't already said? This game is such an achievement. I think it is going to be the defining game of this generation, and yes, that includes all consoles, including PlayStation and Xbox. I think that people will remember this landmark moment, Breath of the Wild. And it's interesting because I feel like it's the first time Zelda has achieved this kind of status since the Ocarina of Time, basically, in 1998, man, for the Nintendo 64. I think, obviously, the first Zelda was a game changer, then A Link to the Past was a game changer. Ocarina of Time was a huge polar shift in all of things gaming, and I think that even though I adore every single Zelda release since Ocarina of Time to Breath of the Wild, and in fact, my favorite Zelda of all time is The Wind Waker, I think Breath of the Wild was the first time that the series landed with a collective huge thud that no one on the planet, no one in the gaming industry could ignore. Breath of the Wild was that impactful. And it also was an amazing way to launch a console. Yes, it released on the Wii U, but it also launched the Switch. And we know most people bought it on the Switch, let's be real. And it sold the Switch to a lot of people. And my experience having a brand new console, doing something I've never seen before, and playing this brand new, incredible, life-changing Zelda, it was euphoric. I felt like I was 18 years old again. I felt like I was 20 years old again, man, playing old N64 games and getting ready for the 6th generation. And just how exciting gaming was at that time because we were still doing stuff that was new. And, like, it's not like Breath of the Wild even does the most new stuff, but the way it felt for Zelda and the way it did the open world thing, I think was new for both the franchise and for the genre of open world sandbox games. I mean, it is something where I was so giddy with glee, like a little boy, just running through this world the first couple of days I played it. It was magic. I seriously just felt like a little kid again, and I had this huge grin on my face, and I could not believe what I was experiencing. Similar to God of War, how God of War consistently wowed me in kind of a different way. The way Breath of the Wild did it was just even more memorable and more impactful, you know? Yes, I'm a diehard Nintendo fan, and I'm a diehard lifelong Zelda fan, so some fanboyism is probably coming out here as well, but that's fine. That's what it means to be a game fan. That's what it means to be a gamer and to have favorite franchises and characters. And, you know, playing Breath of the Wild for that first week is an experience I'll never forget. You know, like I said, just like when Ocarina of Time first came out, going through that is an experience I will never forget. And I think that Breath of the Wild is going to be seen as a turning point in gaming and in the Legend of Zelda franchise in general in years to come. I think, seriously, in 10 years, people will look back on Breath of the Wild and be like, man, everything changed after that game. And we've even already seen the effects because some other open world games that came out around the time, a little before, and even since, I think that people are feeling the Breath of the Wild effect because if you can't do some of the things in your open world game that Breath of the Wild allowed you to do, you feel restricted. I mean, I started playing Horizon Zero Dawn just a couple of months ago, over a year, almost 2 years after that game came out. And I'm like, man, I know this game, you know, was like developed alongside Breath of the Wild, so I can't blame it for this, but I feel restricted. I felt so heavy and grounded and not free. Even though I like Horizon, I felt a lack of freedom, and it's because Breath of the Wild changed everything. Being able to climb everything was a game changer. Having the sail claw or the glider and being able to glide across this humongous map was a game changer. Obviously, the shrines is one of the coolest additions. I do miss traditional dungeons, but I thought the 120 shrines was a fantastic thing to trade out for the sake of the Breath of the Wild experience. And so, I could go on forever about it, but at the end of the day, what else can be said? Breath of the Wild, one of the best games ever created, and easily the best game I've played this generation. So, that's my list of the 6th best games that I personally have played and experienced this generation. And, of course, like I said, there were so many games that almost could have made it on this list. Gears of War 4, Octopath Traveler, Super Mario Odyssey, Uncharted 4. I mean, the list just goes on and on. There's probably 20 games I could have included on this list. But I wanted to keep it focused, like I said, to just 5 or 6 games because I think that it's simpler and easier and a little bit more fun. And, you know, also, like I said in the beginning, I don't play every game, every genre, every franchise. I'm just one gamer. So, you know, I didn't play Red Dead Redemption 2 because it doesn't appeal to me. I didn't play Kingdom Hearts 3 because it doesn't appeal to me. You know, not big on a lot of RPGs and JRPGs and stuff. Even though I loved Octopath and Xenoblade Chronicles 2, for example, you know, that's a genre that I don't really spend a whole lot of time with. So, I don't know. At the end of the day, it's been a great generation, man. So many games. Everyone is firing on all cylinders as far as their game development, you know, and their game releases. Obviously, some console sales maybe not as exciting as others, but in general, just as far as the video games this generation, man, what a time to be alive. So much great stuff. And so this was a lot of fun. I enjoyed the kind of fun random list video. Hopefully you guys had fun with it. Please discuss my 6 choices as well as your own favorite games of the generation so far. I think it's a lot of fun to talk about that stuff. What do you guys think about the 8th gen this far in, now that it's honestly probably almost over? So with that being said, this video is a wrap. Thanks, of course, as always, for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Ro2R, and I'll catch you next time on another video.